only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this web seminar entitled Practical Business Intelligence for Manufacturers. My name is Jacques Descaries. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Industrial Software. I have two of my colleagues online with me today. One is Renato De Gasperis. Renato is President and Chief Technology Officer. He's online with me to handle questions that you can log through the questions panel. A little bit more on that in a second. I'm also joined by Edward Zuccallo, and Edward is the Vice President of Member Advisory and Practices. And Edward's role in today's session is essentially to handle the product demonstration side of things. So again, thank you for joining us. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The first one is that even though you are all muted during this session, we do want to hear from you and allow you to ask questions. So that's why Renato's online today to handle questions from the questions panel. You should be able to see on your web seminar control panel on the right-hand side, there should be a subsection there to allow you to ask questions. So please feel free to use this at any point in time during the session, and Renato will do his best to answer your questions promptly. The second item that's of housekeeping nature is that on the GoToWebinar control panel, there's also a section called Handouts that you can use again at any time during this session to download handouts. There are 3 handouts available. One is the slide deck of today's intro and conclusion. The second one is a 1-page data sheet about PlantGauge, which is our manufacturing intelligence dashboard. And finally, there's an infographic published by an organization called MESA that's called Manufacturing Metrics That Matter. So again, these are free of charge, they're handouts, and you can download them. Okay. A quick overview of the agenda. We'll kick things off today with a little bit of theory, starting with addressing the questions. Number 1, what is big data? And 2, why should you care? Then we'll get into discussions about real-life examples of the use of metrics in business. We're going to look at 3 ways that, forgive the acronym here, KPI stands for Key Performance Indicators. So 3 ways that these are used in manufacturing. And then we will move on to some of the more common specific metrics that are tracked by manufacturers. After that bit of theory, we'll get a little bit more practical with a description of the Industrial's PlantGauge Manufacturing Intelligence Dashboard, followed by a short product demonstration. Okay, so big data. So we hear the expression all the time. It applies to all walks of life. We hear about big data relating to government, communications, security, transportation, music, baseball, you name it. Technology today allows us to capture more data than we ever thought possible. Now, the slide in front of you here, I don't usually like to go off script, but this morning I came across this site called Cyber Squirrel, which happens to map locations of blackouts caused by squirrels in North America. So, and you can use the filter navigation bar, I guess, for lack of a better term, to filter by year, month, and even type of animal. And that just caught my attention. I thought it illustrated really well how pervasive big data is right now. We seem to have statistics for everything. And so continuing on that topic, although there are many challenges associated with big data, like capturing it, making sure it's secure, storing it, data integrity, there's timeliness. The biggest challenge for most consumers of data today is in making sense of it and interpreting it so that you extract value from it. The answer to the second question that we posed earlier, why should you care, is in here. If you can make sense of the data and extract value from it, then obviously you should care. Now, how do you do that? Well, at a high level, if you can get data organized and presented in a way that it can either A, support decision making, B, prompt awareness about certain conditions, or C, support and drive activity, then the data becomes meaningful. If this information now paves a path to increased competitiveness, agility, and or employee engagement, I think we all agree that there's value here. Now, in manufacturing, companies have been attempted to capture valuable information from data for decades. The complexity of manufacturing operations actually lends itself well to the concepts of big data. In fact, you could say that every manufacturing firm out there has its very own big data mart to deal with, interpret, and derive value out of. Some companies over the last several decades have done exceptionally well at this. And in the following slides, we'll have a look at a few examples of this. So there's a book called The Great Game of Business that's been out on the market since the early 1990s. The book tells the story of a company that was facing a shutdown, bought by the employees for a song, and turned into one of the most remarkable business success stories America has witnessed. The company in question, International Harvester, was bought in 1983 by its employees and was the object of a major overhaul using concepts known today as open book management. The results were absolutely impressive. In the 9 years between the acquisition and the book, International Harvester revenues grew from 16 million per year to 83 million, and the company value grew from $100,000 to 25 million. The turnaround in this company was attributed to the practice of open book management, which essentially consists of picking key metrics, measuring them, publishing these to all employees without exception, then educating employees on the metrics' meaning. Employees are then asked to contribute to goal setting and target setting and work every day at improving these metrics. And of course, there are secondary concepts here inside of open book management, one of which is that management style comes into play. If nobody pays attention, people stop caring. It's up to management to draw attention to the metrics regularly and to stimulate discussions about suggestions for improvement. The success story of International Harvester was the inspiration behind the book, The Great Game of Business. This book has since become the scripture for a management consulting program that was founded by the then CEO of International Harvester, Jack Stack. Inc. magazine calls him the father of open book management. Companies can hire consultants from the Great Game of Business and get guidance as to how to apply open book management concepts in their firms. The uniqueness about this program is that it wasn't born in a New York think tank. It's based on a true story, and of course, an amazing one at that, as you can tell by some of the figures I've already outlined. But to kind of round it off, by the time the 20th edition was made available, International Harvester's value, now SRC, had grown 348,000%. So how does this relate to big data? Well, as you can imagine, tools to capture and publish KPIs about a business, which are, of course, necessary components of an open book management practice. So these tools to capture and publish KPIs have evolved tremendously since 1993. And it's only made the great game of business more interesting and, some would say easier to apply. A study published in 2012 conducted by MESA, which is an acronym for the Manufacturing Enterprise Solutions Association. So they published a study in 2012. It was based on a survey of 300 manufacturing firms around the world, different types, different sizes, different countries. What the study did is that it focused on the most successful of these businesses. So they picked the top performing 75 or so out of the 300. They called these 75 in the study, they called them business movers. And what the study focused on then was in identifying the technologies and the business practices that these business movers applied. Not surprisingly, the business movers were found to apply concepts of open book management in their daily practices, including publishing KPIs and using these to drive improvement in key areas that lead them to success. So if you want to find out more about this study, one of the handouts from today's session that I referred to earlier is an infographic from MESA. You can get from this their website address. If you're interested in the study, you can go to their website and go to I believe it's the resources section, and it's there available for download. The study is called Pursuit of Performance Excellence. The business practices that are identified in the MESA study, which are the same as the ones promoted by the Great Game, can be summarized as follows: measure, engage, and act. In measurement, it's important that metrics be selected that apply to all areas of a manufacturing firm. The illustration here on the slide that I'm projecting shows metrics being captured in 8 different areas. So there's finance, inventory, innovation, responsiveness, efficiency, quality, maintenance, and compliance. Alignment is also key. The Great Game book speaks of a prominent CEO in the 80s who went ahead and told his employees that customer service was key, even though his own pay was linked to return on net assets. So the result of this was employees who were eager to service customers went out and invested in all this inventory so that they could service customers more promptly. You can imagine what that did to the return on net asset. It had an adverse effect. And once the board of directors figured that out, they took all kinds of measures which are not really relevant in this. At the end of the day, the main message here is make sure you stay aligned in your practices from the boardroom to the shop floor, and vice versa, all the way back. Now, to properly engage, employees will need to be educated on the meaning of the KPIs they'll be managing with. Not everybody on a shop floor or or anywhere else in an organization can be expected to understand KPIs like capacity utilization, for example, or even how it's calculated. So the idea in these practices is teach your people, publish the KPIs, then review, discuss suggestions for improvement, and after that, act on your conclusions and start the continuous improvement cycle. We've all heard of this axiom before: you can manage what you measure, provided that it's, of course, under your control. Okay, so here are some of the most common KPIs used in manufacturing firms. Of course, not all apply to all firms. What's key in one firm is not necessarily key in another. There are differences in size, type of manufacturing, sector of activity, breadth of operation. All these can play a role in deciding what's key to your firm. In any case, here's a rundown of some of the few common KPIs, starting with capacity utilization, which indicates how much of the total manufacturing capacity is being utilized at any given point in time. There's downtime in proportion to operating time. This is a ratio of downtime to operating time, a direct indicator of asset availability for production. Resource efficiency, a measure of how well some resource performed relative to an established standard. One of these resources could be labor, so specifically labor efficiency, generally expressed as a percentage of actual hours versus planned hours, and this can be looked at from an individual standpoint or in groups. Manufacturing cycle time is another one that's commonly measured. The time it takes for manufacturing to produce a specified product from the time the order is released to production to the time it makes its way into finished goods. Manufacturing cost as a percentage of revenue. That's a ratio of total manufacturing costs to the overall revenues produced by a manufacturing facility. On-time delivery to commit is another. The percentage of times that manufacturing delivers a completed product on the schedule that was committed to customers. Then there are others like productivity, the measure of overall production ability for manufacturing the product. There's throughput, which measures how much product is being manufactured over a specific period of time. Work in progress, many of us are familiar with that one, the amount of inventory that's tied up in WIP or work in progress, expressed usually as a dollar amount. And finally, there's yield, the percentage of products that are manufactured correctly to specifications the first time through the process without scrap or rework. So these are some of the common KPIs, again, that are in use in manufacturing. Now, tying these concepts back to open book management, as a management team, what you want to ask yourself is, could some of these KPIs be valuable to you or for you? Are you getting them right now? Are you getting them in a timely fashion? What other KPIs may be critical to your success? Are your people aware that you're measuring them, that these are key to your success? Could you solicit their help for improvement? Okay, so the following segment of this session focuses on what tools Industrios brings to the table for our customers to help them apply business practices described so far. The diagram in front of you describes the business processes that Industrios ERP supports. The orange hexagons represent the processes supported by Industrios ERP. These include estimating and quoting, sales order management, production order management, MRP, scheduling, inventory, shop floor tracking, shipping, project costing and job costing, and finally, manufacturing CRM slash customer service. The gray hexagons represent the best-in-class third-party applications that we have used integration tools to build bridges between these and industrials. Examples of these include financials like Sage, QuickBooks, or Oracle, engineering applications like AutoCAD or SolidWorks, payroll packages is another example, or even logistics carriers. What you get out of this diagram is that industrial CRP captures a lot of data for our customers. To help convert this data into meaningful information, Industrials is built in such a way as to provide actionable management tools for its users. One of these tools is Plant Gauge. What is Plant Gauge? Well, Plant Gauge is Industrios' manufacturing intelligence dashboard. What Plant Gauge does is it reads information written to the Industrials data mart and can publish metric boxes to inform, motivate, or even alert to certain conditions. So Edward will walk us through specifics in a minute, but good examples include purchase orders to expedite or late POs not yet received. These are not only presenting information, but the beauty of having these metrics is run inside of Industrials allows linking to action-oriented screens that facilitate addressing situations efficiently. So again, to elaborate on the example I mentioned earlier, clicking on the PO to expedite metric box would take the user right into a workbench to allow him or her to take action right from that workbench. Plant Gauge also allows advanced visualization, and this is done by embedding the Tableau business intelligence tools as an add-on to Plant Gauge. And these advanced visualizations basically give users all the power of the Tableau software industry-leading functionality in data visualization. So Edward will show us a glimpse into this in a few minutes. Finally, Plant Gauge can also be displayed in theater mode. You can see an example of this in the picture in the middle of the slide that I'm presenting right now. And so what displaying in theater mode allows is it allows KPIs to be displayed on a large screen monitor onto the plant floor. So a very good tool for sharing information with your employees in the plant. Of course, many firms today publish KPIs on whiteboards. In many cases, these are posted weekly. Industrials with Plant Gauge allows companies to move into the world of real-time publishing, which can be really key in many processes and can also facilitate open book management and foster employee engagement. Okay, so we are right on time. Time for the product presentation. As mentioned earlier, Edward, and no, this isn't a picture of Edward. I think you've recognized this character, but I trust you'll find Edward's a better choice than Vince the Chamois guy. So Edward is our VP of Member Advisory and Practices Group. Edward brings with him many years of successfully using technology and solving manufacturing business problems in the field with Industrials customers. So at this point, I will want to make you, Edward, the presenter. And I think I've succeeded in this. Edward?
There we go. Jacques, let me know when you can see my industrial screen.
I can see your screen. Thank you. It's all yours.
Thank you. So this next portion of the presentation in our practical business intelligence for manufacturers is going to show you some of the approaches that we've taken as a software provider to give you some tools to mine your data, to present your data, and maybe communicate differently with your employees through the Industrios framework. So how can we make presentation of information practical? So we thought the best way would be to put it into your hands, because each of you would know the best ways that you want to track information, or what are the important measures, as Jacques described earlier, that resonate with you or can connect your top floor to bottom floor and get everybody marching in the same direction. So the plant gauge module allows for a couple of different modes of information or ways to present information, and the first one is a communication tool by changing the menu structure of the Industrios main screen from the folder approach that used to be there to this dashboard-oriented approach with the left-hand side of modules and a canvas on the right-hand side that gives you an area to add information. What you're looking at right now is the standard tool or the standard piece of information that's displayed once a new user starts up Industrios, and this then gets put into an administrator's hands to change the type of information to be shown. What I will show you is a couple of different kinds of canvases or dashboards that will, in different layers, integrate with the information in Industrios and make it actionable. So the first one maybe we can talk about is just using it as a pure communication tool. So even if you don't want to get to the level of looking at bits and bytes and data and information, the first thing you want to do is start to have consistent messaging throughout the organization. So I've created a dashboard here called Communication Central and added two kind of gadgets onto it. The first one just being a poke into a URL of a web page, and this is a news page from a particular. It can be a news page from yourself or from your customers or your vendors to transmit that information into the Industrios user base as needed. As well, if I click on this latest success story, the canvas changes, and I'm now displaying a file, which is somewhere on the network, and again can be used to propagate information. Can be anything from you've got an audit coming up, or what the areas to be looked at in terms of an audit, or what the scores are in particular areas that maybe you've received from your clients or your vendors, and you want to display that into the Industrios main menu and into the communication screen dashboard. So kind of your first layer of putting this practical tool into your hands is to give you a vehicle to move that kind of information through. As we peel forward, maybe the next one that I'll show you is moving into a gadget that we call a calendar. And so in this case, I've replaced the dashboard or the canvas with a calendar, and I have elected to display a particular kind of activity or appointment that is within the Industrios product group data set that I'm looking at here. And the tool allows us to create new appointments right from this screen, or to drill right in and edit that appointment within the Industrios module, bring up the Industrios information and click through and start drilling back and maybe actioning, completing the task or forwarding the task as it may be. And already we have some clients that are using this to communicate information such as container shipments and expected shipments coming through in a particular period, so people are aware that these things are happening. So when you are using a tool like PlantGauge and you're looking at the different ways that you can, I guess, vertically and horizontally use your information. You don't necessarily always have to go to a gauge-oriented dashboard. You can start to use that information in kind of different ways. Of course, at the end of the day, we definitely have an area or an ability to display the more standard kind of gadgets, which are more data information oriented. Before I get to those, we're going to take a little quick jaunt through the setup of PlantGauge itself and the data marts, as we call them. So part of this presentation will be showing you some of the technologies or some of the structures behind the module to display the information, and other ones will be, and the rest of it will be in showing you how you can deploy this. We will be distributing the product, or are distributing the product, with some standardized tools already available for you. But the intent here is for you as users to be able to take this in the directions that you need to display the kind of information that you want to. So at the core of the display of information is what we call a data mart. And the data mart effectively is a receptacle of data that is going to go through and can be recalculated or created as needed. Some of them might be calculated every hour, or some maybe only every week need to be calculated, and that's really up to you and how you launch the calculation of these data marts. The data mart area, it's all wizard driven, so it's quite follow the bouncing ball oriented in terms of going through and creating something. And if I wanted to create a new data mart, the kinds of areas that you can look at, go range from sales through purchasing, inventory, time and attendance, or HR type functions, and or production. So kind of the core areas that you would be generating information out of Industrios. So the data marts don't have to be one per, as you will see in a little bit. We're going to be able to define these data marts right to a very deep level if we want to, just to show particular pieces of information and display those back to the user. Let's take a look at the wizard that we use to create the sales order data mart here. And I'll go through the different tabs. So in this case, I'm looking at sales, and I have elected to keep my first summarization level, which you're drilling into picked fields from within the system, and can select up to 5 dimensions here, where you can effectively measure or filter on your information to group and accumulate. The dimensions then will give us the other axis in order to apply measures to them, numeric measures such as summarizations or mins or maxes or averages. And depending on the type of output that you're looking for, as you go through and decide what those indicators are, what those measures are, you can create data marts to support specific requirements. We have a function here that allows you to do transformations and calculations so that you can be converting information from one unit measure to another, or different things within the database. And then an area to apply targets. So sometimes measures, as you know, will be more static oriented or numeric oriented, where you're showing a number, and other times you want to show progress towards a particular target or goal. So in the definition of your target database, you can be comparing information such as last year versus this year. You can look at one company versus another company and show your progression towards that target. And as Jacques had presented earlier, how you present that information to your employees and how you allow them to be empowered by what it's displaying to you will and should increase communication and obviously involvement from that community base, from the shop floor, hopefully. The area, the data mart can also be cross product group function. So if you're familiar with the Industrios product group company methodology, then you'll see here that you can create corporate level data marts that will combine information from similar databases from different product groups, so you can have more of a consolidated view of your information. And finally, the data mart can get right down to, by using Boolean operators, right down to very specific information in terms of how you want to filter and limit the information that goes to the data mart. So if you have something that you want to deploy quite often and have it recalculated often, the smaller you have that data set, the faster obviously it will be, and this filtering will allow you to get to that goal. In our work to date, in our trials, we've had data sets that have up to 3.5 million records, and to create a data mart with all of the structures underneath has taken less than 3 minutes. Typical users, we feel that it'll be between 30 seconds and 1 minute to recalculate that whole data mart that can then be used to deploy the measures on top. Now, the structure around having this wizard, what it's doing is it's putting all the information together, and at the time of calculate and generating the table, we'll actually go right down into the database itself and create the database name, create the database structures based on the dimensions and measures that you had, and populate that data, all without any user intervention. So from the practicality point of view, your focus as an implementer or as a user will be to decide the information that you want to display. The structure and function of how to get that information into a format that the database or the dashboard can display is what the plant gauge tool is bringing to the table. So with that, let's go back, and we have some data generated. Let's go back and take a look at the information-related canvases and dashboards. The three that I've created. One is the key sales indicators, another visualization on sales by orders, and a third visualization on sales management analysis. So the first one, if I click on the key sales indicators, will change to my dashboard that shows, in this case, 6 tiles or 6 gadgets which are information-oriented, and a gauge that I've added on to this dashboard. The positioning, the coloring, the icon structures are all within the user control, and I'll show you in a moment. We'll go through this test gadget in a moment, but you can just redisplay and resort and sequence and size the information onto the dashboard so that it displays in an appropriate manner depending on where you can display it. We'll end off by looking at the theater mode. So sometimes you're going to want to make the gadgets larger so that you can display them on large screens within the plant. If I look at the gadget itself, I've got some that are number oriented. I got some that are dollars, depending on the kind of information that I've gone in to pull the system from. The magnifying glass that's available on some of them, which is a choice, allows us to drill into the information. And at this point, we get an industrial's view of the data, which we can sort through the customers. We can be looking through information that might catch our attention. And if you're familiar with the folder methodology, we should be able to click on the folder and go right into the order within Industrials right from the database or the data mart visualization itself, which is potentially a way that you can implement the plant gauge module into workflows. So if you have a gauge or a gadget which is displaying maybe shipments to date or shipments entered into the system, you can then utilize the integration of that gadget to action the shipments if required, and use that as a trigger within your workflow. All of the tools that you would have within Industrials, from the CRM tools to the drilling tools, are all available to you from the screen. And as I back out, I get back into my data table. As well, for those that want to continue their path to looking at the information in different ways, there is an export to Excel function on the data table there, which will throw the information right out into a table that I can now use and create pivot tables, create charts, save in different formats, save it to maybe my cloud, and work with it in those different formats in different places. So again, the work to get to the information in a place that makes it quick and removes maybe noise out of the system and just focuses on on the kind of information to support those indicators is the goal of the tool itself. I'm going to come back in a second here and take a look at the creation of a gadget, but first I want to go through the two visualizations. So the standard tool allows us to add a number of different kinds of gadgets, but for those that need or that want that Tableau advanced visualization that Jacques was mentioning, you can integrate with it and display any number of graphs. You can have multiple graphs per page or per dashboard. In this case, I've elected to have one per page. And the tool then brings to you some functionality to work with your data in this visual method. So not only can you unselect years and be looking at specific things, but right when you get into the chart itself, you can interact with the chart, and you might want to take a look at the underlying data within that chart. So rather than having to go through the Industrios screens, you can be working with it in different formats. You can be exporting this information. You can publish the information in some different formats, and you can again integrate it into your workflows. As well as I'm looking at some of my data characteristics, you'll see I can exclude and keep only, and it gives you a nice little flyby of what the data underlying data, how it's represented within the visualization itself. So there are, within the Tableau model, there are standard charts and functions that you would expect, from line charts to bar charts to pie charts and those type of things. What it also allows you to do, if we flip over into our sales management analysis, is to begin to publish information in kind of different ways. And I now wish that I had the squirrel data that I could display in this area, which would give you kind of this visual approach to seeing what the impact of some of the data filters or the data groupings that I have. And in this case, if BC205 is too overriding and it just kind of skews the view that I want to see and I want to take it out, I can quickly and just exclude it and resize and reshape the bubbles to give me maybe a different view or a different indication of what information is important to me. For those of you that have logged in or signed up for Apple iMusic, you'll see that this was one of the methods that Apple used to make suggestions to you in terms of the kind of music or artists that would be most beneficial to you. And so it's becoming a standardized type tool out there to look at your information. You're not looking at it in a grid any longer, you're not looking at it in a chart, but you're looking at it in different visualization forms that contextually change to give you different pictures within the system. Okay. And you can have a lot of fun doing this. Go back to my key indicators and edit one of my dashboards here. Let's edit this gadget. And we're going to look at this. And I'm going to select to edit this gadget. So the gadget itself, as you can see, it's the same wizard approach that we have to creating the data mart, where we're just walking through, picking information as we require it. Which data mart are we displaying from? Do we have a target or not? What's the measure that we're using, and what function do we want to display? Then we move into how do we want the information to be displayed? Do we want any symbology for that the data? And how in colors do we want to show it, and iconography as well, to give you again that nice visual approach as you are kind of walking by a screen. A color or some type of icon might become important or become useful in terms of looking at the information. The drill down option, yes or no, and we move forward, and we can actually then here, if I was using a gauge, I can display from 0 to 20% might be in green, or yellow or red, from 20 to 80% might be in yellow, and 80 to 100 in green, and I would then make that change within the gadget itself. So I then can use the tool and the colors as a relative percentage or a relative indication as to what's happening with the data underlying. Obviously, you have to support that with the right structures of how you are calculating the data, because as new records are being added to your databases, you want that information represented on your screens, and you can control that with the way that the system allows you to create those gadgets, to calculate the gadgets themselves within the module. Within the canvas itself, again, as I noted, we have the ability to move around and change the relative location of the gadgets to make it presentable in a form that makes the most sense to you, and puts it in your hands again to make it a practical way for you to display your information. The calculation of the databases themselves are within the standard Industrious calculation methodology, where you have your send application server, and you have the timing and the scheduling of that application server action as well. So you can have the system constantly polling and recalculating data marts as required in order to support the gadgets that you've elected to display on your screen. The last thing we want to show you is the theater mode. So now that I have 3 dashboards, in this case under my sales order area, I have key sales indicators and then 2 visualizations. I've elected to go in and create a dashboard or a theater that I've called the boardroom. So in this case, I've called the ID boardroom. I can assign that ID to a particular computer or a particular monitor. I've given it a name, and I can go through and show you how it is the wizard allows me to display, of all of the tools that I have and all the available dashboards and categories, which ones do I want to show, and when do I want to show them, what time of the day, and how long do I want that displayed. So in this case, this tool is going to go through and show the first dashboard for 10 seconds on these days of the week from this time of the day, move on to the next dashboard, and just keep cycling through that until I stop. And you can, again, because of your schedule, you can control when that dashboard is being displayed. So as I move back out and I actually deploy that theater, go back here and down to here, display. It asks me which one do I want to display. In this case, I have just the one, and I go ahead and start. Gives a second to think about what it wants to do, and in a moment now it'll change and move into the display of the theater, I expect. Or maybe not. Aha. So I've broken a rule because it's later in the afternoon than I thought it was. The last time we did this calculation, it was between 10 and 2, and now it won't start. So I'll hand it back to Jacques. He can go through and answer your questions, and I thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Edward, for this very good illustration of plant gauge manufacturing intelligence dashboard. I think every time I see this, well, hopefully you're getting the same sense that dashboards are not only visually appealing, but typically they're information packed. And as Edward mentioned as well, if you make them part of your workflow, they can definitely be action oriented. So, all right, so how do we get started? Well, you have, there are 5 ways that you could get in touch with us to engage us in further discussions. Of course, you could go to our website. You could email us at sales@industrials.com. Some of you may be working with Paul Shantz, who may be your account manager, and he can be reached at pshantz@industrials.com. And of course, you could call us, or finally, you could use the question panel to indicate that you'd like to engage in discussions. So Okay, at this point, I think we have time for a few questions. Just looking at the question panel here, I see that there's a number of, there's a few questions that have been logged. Okay, so one of the comments is from an industrials customer that says, my screen looks different. So essentially, it's a question of version. So what Edward's been, or what Edward used today to show us industrials and plant gauge is basically industrials version 3.6. So if your screens look different, you're likely a version or a few versions behind 3.6. Fortunately, if you're on our maintenance and support program, you can get that upgrade free of charge and upgrade at any time. So hopefully that answers that question. Then there was another question. I suspect it came from the diagram when we talked about using integration tool to integrate to best-in-class third-party applications. So there's a question out there with respect to whether we have developed a Salesforce.com integration, and the answer to that is we have not yet, but it is on the product plan for 2016. So I know that we've had a number of requests from customers wanting to have access to industrials information right from CRM tools, and the one that seems to be kind of taking over the marketplace right now is Salesforce.com, and that's how that item has really crept up on our product priority list for 2016. Let me just do a quick glance at some of the other questions. So some of them are with respect to difficulties with downloading handouts. So we'll make sure we get back to you on those. I think oh, so Edward, you're suggesting that you could show theater mode, I gather. I think, you know what, that might be, before we wrap up, that might be a good idea. So let me see if I can switch back over to you. And so is that what you were suggesting, Edward?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Is the screen displaying now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we should be now displaying theater. So as I noted just before I stopped there, because we had this this sales tool only showing between 10 and 2, and that was an internal joke here because salespeople only tend to work between 10 and 2. We had it locked off at 2 o'clock because they weren't looking at it. So now that it's almost 4 o'clock, I've opened it up, and now you can see that the three tables or the three dashboards that I've decided to display in this theater are being cycled through on the time basis that I had elected. Obviously, I'm going very quickly so I can get through the three screens themselves, but you can imagine on your shop floor or in your boardroom or in your sales office or in your logistics area, your purchasing area, any one of these places can be displaying the type of data mart information that we've talked about, right from production and purchasing, sales, time and attendance, and inventory, to give people a real deep look at the pulse of the data that's being generated in the company and the effect that it's having specifically towards those KPIs. And as we tie it back to, this is the practical way to look at those kind of more not the academic approach to looking at the information and deciding what the measures have to be, and now we're making them quite real for everybody and in everybody's view all the time. So Jacques, thank you for that. I hated to leave the presentation without actually showing the theater, and you've made me a happy camper.
Okay, excellent. We like you a happy camper, Edward. And so on that note, it's 3:55. I think it's probably time to wrap up. I scanned the questions again. We didn't have anything else. We did spend quite a bit of time together. I hope you have all found today's session informative. I also hope that we've left you with the impression that one, big data is here. Two, that business intelligence and dashboards can help you make sense of your own big data. And three, that at Industrios, we're working at helping our customers deploy tools and business practices to put big data and business intelligence at work for your continuous improvement purposes in your drive for increased competitiveness. So on that note, I thank you all for your attention today. I really look forward to continuing or to working with you in the future. And that's it. We'll wrap it up. Happy manufacturing, everybody.